thank you for joining us for the third annual Global Summit on Innovations in Patient-Centered Kidney Care, a partnership event presented by the American Association of Kidney Patients and the George Washington University School of Medicine and Health Sciences. My name is Diana Clynes, and I'm the Executive Director for the American Association of Kidney Patients. I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Michelle Tarver, Director of Patient Science and Engagement with the Center for Devices and Radiological Health at the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, along with Ms. Rosemarie Sellati, Global Head of Patient Advocacy-Transplant for Novatris. Both are joining us for a session on International Kidney Innovations Consortium, Policymakers, Practitioners, and Patients Respond. As we enter into the decade of the kidney, the AAKP is leading efforts in the emerging global consortium for kidney innovation that is being led by patient consumers around the world who are rejecting status quo kidney care. We are driving a patient-centered culture where kidney patients, as consumers of healthcare, are at the table and influencing decisions that are being made about them, because no longer will decisions be made without them. This growing global network of patient organizations will be working closely with their government and industry to inspire change. We respect all professionals who have elevated and embraced not only patients, but patients as healthcare consumers. And both Dr. Tarver and Ms. Sellati will speak directly to the importance and unmistakable value of patient engagement in both federal agencies and industry. I'd now like to turn it over to Dr. Tarver.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to share with you the work we're doing at the Center for Devices and Radiological Health on incorporating the patient perspective in the medical device evaluation. I'm Michelle Tarver, and I'm the Deputy Director of the Office of Strategic Partnerships and Technology Innovation at the Center for Devices and Radiological Health. Patients are at the heart of everything we do. In fact, it is the first word of our vision statement that patients in the U.S. have access to high-quality, safe, and effective medical devices of public health importance first in the world. Now, patients are the first word because they are the most important person in the equation. In fact, patient input is useful across the total product life cycle. Patients help inform the needs and, in fact, direct where there are technologies absent that meet those needs. Patients can also give us insights in how the device is designed, as well as inform how the trial is designed so that it captures outcomes that are important to patients, as well as measuring those outcomes in a way that allows for patients to be retained in the trial and give good quality data. Patients also lend their perspective on how they value the benefits and risks associated with the medical device and its alternative treatment options. And those perspectives are important in our regulatory decision-making process. Patients also give us insights on how we can communicate those benefits and risks back to other patients in a way that they can understand and can inform their healthcare decision-making. And then lastly, patients are part of our boots-on-the-ground surveillance system, giving us insights into how a device is performing once it's in the general use. Our CDRH Patient Science and Engagement Program is inspired by patients and driven by science. It was formed a few years ago solely with the purpose to make sure our entire center understands the patient's perspectives and proactively incorporates them into all our decisions and regulatory activities where it's appropriate. The three pillars that undergird this overarching goal is consistent regulatory review, when patient information is included in a medical device submission, fostering a culture of patient engagement, and working to optimize the research roadmap, creating evidence that supports the incorporation of structured, well-defined patient input into regulatory decision-making. Let's focus for a moment on how we do consistent regulatory review. Before I start talking about that, I want to level set on how patient input is incorporated in regulatory efforts specifically. We talk about patient engagement, and people use that term quite loosely, but our draft definition is that patient engagement are those intentional, meaningful interactions with patients that provide opportunities for us to mutually learn and to effectively collaborate across the total product life cycle. It is a relationship. but it's a relationship that supports the development of the science of patient input. In fact, there are many different forms of the science of patient input, but two I'd like to highlight here are patient-reported outcomes, which is any report of the status of a patient's health condition that comes directly from the patient without interpretation of the patient's response by a clinician or anyone else. It's how they feel, how they function, and how they survive in life. Patient preference information is different than that. This is how patients view the value or the importance of the benefits and the risks of a particular treatment or its alternatives, and how they make a decision about which treatment they would choose. This information also can be collected in a structured and well-defined way that can impact regulatory work. The ways that we disclose what's important to FDA and transmit those recommendations is through guidance processes. We have put forth many guidance documents that help to detail how patient input can be used in our efforts, but one I'd like to highlight is a draft guidance that we issued last year on how patient-reported outcomes can be selected, developed, modified, and adapted for use in medical device evaluation. It's almost a best principles guide that talks about some of the important elements for people to consider if they're going to include it in their development pipeline. We know that by clear and consistent communication of the expectations that FDA has, we're more likely to have an impact on the pipeline across the total product lifecycle. One different mechanism that we use is the Medical Device Development Tool Program, where we qualify patient-reported outcome measures as well as other tools to create efficiency in our process, as well as minimize the uncertainty in the regulatory review process for industry. We currently have 3 qualified instruments in the program, and a number of other patient-reported outcome measures are under review in various different product areas. We encourage developers to submit to this program because we do know that it has benefits across many different devices, particularly those innovative technologies. Some of our efforts have had regulatory impacts. In fact, we have seen, because of our clear guidance documents, that industry is more likely to do patient studies, and one of them includes the patient preference information studies. In fact, there are 24 industry-sponsored studies that have been completed or in the pipeline, and those studies have expanded our labeled indication for medical devices, as well as informed the design of a clinical trial by helping to set the performance targets. Patient-reported outcomes have also had an impact in our regulatory work, with over 50% of studies with clinical data, including a patient-reported outcome measure. The only way we're able to accomplish this, as I alluded to earlier, is by fostering a culture of patient engagement, both within the walls of CDRH and outside. We have put on our website a video that details the ways in which patients can engage with our center. And in fact, it features one of AAKP's own, Paul Conway. This gives some insights to patients that we are open to hearing directly from patients about their experiences. We also have a very formal mechanism called the Patient Engagement Advisory Committee. This committee is the only one like it at the agency. It is comprised of diverse patients, caregivers, and patient advocates. And our goal with this committee is to hear formal recommendations regarding general matters related to medical devices. We have had a number of PEAC meetings over the years, touching on areas such as the design and conduct of clinical trials, post-market data safety surveillance, how we communicate around cybersecurity, as well as artificial intelligence and machine learning. We encourage you to visit our website and stay tuned for the upcoming meeting this year on a post-market topic that I think will be of interest to many of you. Our PEAC meeting doesn't just end in the discussion, but it also leads to tangible outcomes. One such outcome was from a theme we heard during our meeting in 2017 on clinical trials. There was a lot of discussion around the omission of certain patients from trials, particularly patients from different racial and ethnic backgrounds. And so we put together with our Office of Minority Health and Health Equity a video to encourage underrepresented populations to participate in medical device clinical trials. We encourage you to view this video. We also drafted a guidance document on how patients can engage in the design and conduct of medical device studies. The draft guidance was posted, and we are working on finalizing this guidance. This is our way of debunking some myths that may have been perceived about patient engagement, as well as encouraging industry and other stakeholders to include the patients in the process. From our PEAC meeting in 2019, we discussed cybersecurity. And from that meeting, we decided to put forward a white paper that talks about best practices on how one might communicate about cybersecurity vulnerabilities. We also committed to launching a mini-series on cybersecurity hygiene, and we encourage you to visit our websites and check for updates on this effort. So I mentioned some of the work we've done to externally talk about policy as well as efforts to impact medical devices. I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the internal resources we have and efforts we've undertaken to include the patient's voice. The patient and caregiver connection is a mechanism that our staff can use to hear from individual patients about what it's like to live with their specific condition, interact with the medical devices that treat that condition, as well as hear about current issues or concerns facing that patient community. We currently have 18 partners that we reach out to depending on the topic and the need of our review staff. I'd like to share with you a few examples in which members of our patient and caregiver connection have lent their insights to our work. Right before the COVID-19 pandemic hit, we had a workshop on how artificial intelligence is being used in radiological imaging. And we heard from 3 patients and their caregiver about how this technology may impact their quality of life. The insights they shared were valuable to industry and the regulators, and we learned very much from hearing what their concerns are about that technology, as well as the way in which it might be deployed. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we reached out to members of the American Association of Kidney Patients and specifically asked them about challenges they may be having managing their kidney disease. We learned some valuable information that really did help inform the work we were doing on addressing shortages with respect to medical devices. So I want to personally thank all of you who contributed and participated. So our work doesn't start with our regulatory efforts, but it extends beyond that and how we might optimize research to benefit the entire healthcare ecosystem. And we don't do that in a vacuum. We do that collaboratively with patients and other stakeholders, domestically as well as across the globe. On this slide, you can see work that we've been doing in various different disease areas, but our work is designed to de-risk the inclusion of patients' perspectives by taking on that risk ourselves at the center. We also are hoping that we can plant seeds that can lead to innovative technologies, landing in the lives of patients and positively impacting their health. You can see one of our projects that we are doing with the Kidney Health Initiative is focused on wearable technologies to treat kidney disease and how patients weigh the benefits and risks associated with a potential therapy that uses this modality. We also are interested in ensuring that all voices are included in the conversation. So we are doing studies looking at diverse populations, diverse with respect to their age. So we're doing some pediatric studies, diverse with respect to gender, which you saw on the prior slide, as well as this one, some projects in that space, and diverse in terms of the racial and ethnic backgrounds of the patients, because we know that for kidney disease, many of the patients are of African descent, and many of them are non-English speaking. So making sure that we meet their needs, understand their perspectives, is critical in the work we do. That brings me to the last point that I'd like to mention, and that is collaborative communities, which is one of our center's strategic priorities. Collaborative communities are continuing forums where both public and private sector members proactively work together to achieve common objectives and outcomes, to solve shared challenges, and leverage collective opportunities in an environment of trust, respect, empathy, and openness. We are currently participating as a member in over 10 collaborative communities, some of which I'm not able to share with you the details today. And many of those communities, as you can see by the highlighting in orange, have patient participation as well. The ones that are italicized are looking for patient participation. So very clearly, all of our collaborative partners recognize the importance of patient voice. These collaborative efforts include domestic as well as international partners. I encourage you to visit our website where you can find more information about this effort. So to summarize, patients can directly impact medical device evaluation, whether it's by engaging with us, by contributing their outcomes measured in a structured and well-defined way, by sharing with us their preferences, or contributing data that's being collected from digital health technologies and other innovative ways of measuring their experience. It can have a significant impact on our work. As we journey from concept to care, I want to highlight a couple of points. The first is that the medical device ecosystem is shifting. In fact, CDRH has made significant progress in advancing the science of patient input, integrating that science into the work that we do, and making interactions with patients part of our daily business culture. Understanding the patient's perspective and proactively incorporating them into the medical device evaluation process will lead to promotion and protection of public health. We are working to explore the novel applications of patient input through our regulatory science efforts, because we know that there are more emerging methods and technologies that can afford more opportunities to integrate the patient perspective seamlessly into the evaluation of medical technologies. We encourage that working together, journeying together in that pre-competitive space across the healthcare ecosystem, and that will help us seamlessly integrate the patients and their voice in all aspects of health and wellness. We have a number of resources available, and we encourage you to visit our websites for various information, as well as if you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to our mailboxes. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your attention and hope that you also decide to engage with CDRH in the work that we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tarver, for a wonderful presentation. I would now like to welcome Ms. Rosemarie Sellati to present.
Hi there, my name is Rose Sellati, and I'm the Global Patient Engagement and Patient Advocacy Lead for Transplant and Liver Diseases at Novartis. I want to start by thanking AAKP for this opportunity to present to you. I want to tell you a little bit more about my role at Novartis. I support all aspects of drug development and commercial activities, helping teams to identify when, where, and how to implement patient insights and advocacy relations into our work, and ultimately support the patients and the broader community. This support is now end-to-end, so I work with teams in our research facility through various stages of development and into the commercial spaces, including market access. So our goals for today are really for me to share a little bit more about Novartis's commitment to patients, to talk about why it's so important for all of us in industry to recognize the value of patient engagement throughout the life cycle, and to share ways we can engage with the community to meet our aligned goals of improving the lives of patients. Like many companies, we pride ourselves in developing innovative medicines using advances in science and technology. I've worked at a number of companies, large and small, and each company has a certain culture that is embedded into the work environment. One of the things that drew me to Novartis were the people and the welcoming environment they created. The people at Novartis work with purpose, embracing this curiosity and inspiring each other to act with integrity. Novartis is a very big company and develops medicines in many therapeutic areas, including oncology, immunology, rheumatology, and transplant, just to name a few. We have facilities all over the world and employ over 110,000 people. But this size comes with enormous responsibility, and we take this very seriously in developing medicines to ensure that they meet patients' true unmet needs and that patients who need them have proper access. It's no secret that we live in an era of amazing medical innovation driven by better understanding of genetic and biological roots of disease and a surging use of data analytics and digital technology in science and healthcare. My generation saw the creation of the first computer and the World Wide Web, which are now staples in even third world countries. But at the same time, the world's population continues to grow and people are living longer, which is fueling this rise in chronic and debilitating diseases. Together, these factors are increasing the demand for high-quality care worldwide and pressuring health systems to rise to the challenges of these increasing demands. So how can we rise to this challenge of increasing needs? Novartis is a leader in developing transformative medicines to feed into this demand. There are 5 big strategic pillars at Novartis, and the 2 that I'd like to focus on for the rest of my talk are those highlighted in red: delivering transformative innovation and building trust with society. To me, these are the 2 greatest opportunities for patient engagement and patient advocacy relations. Advancing R&D cannot be done without a thorough understanding of patients' unmet needs and the expectations with respect to new medicines. I'm a scientist by training, and I spent 15 years doing basic research and drug development on many chronic and acute immunological diseases. I can tell you firsthand that many scientists tend to think about diseases in a very molecular way and often lose sight of the humanistic aspect of diseases and really know what matters most to patients. One day in my tenure as a scientist, I had the opportunity to speak with a patient suffering from one of the diseases we actively doing research on, psoriasis. And she shared some of the daily challenges she had living with this chronic disease, the plaques, the joint pain, the embarrassing moments, and things she couldn't do because of the disease. But then she said to me, "You know what my biggest issue is living with psoriasis? It's the itch." And she looked me in the eye and she said, "If you are not solving the itch, you're not solving my problem." I thought I knew everything I needed to know about the diseases we were developing medicines for just by understanding the science. But I walked away from that conversation with that patient very humbled and realizing how little I knew. I went back to my lab bench with a new perspective and a more focused direction on which pathways I should target to address this unmet needs that these patients really suffered from. So without patient engagement, we can be misguided, but by working with patients and understanding what matters most to them, we have an opportunity and honestly an obligation to expedite the research we conduct. The dimension of development and clinical trials is just as important. We spend a great deal of time, resources, and money designing trials and conducting trials. Quite a few trials are delayed or even closed due to low enrollment, high dropout, or missing data. The CTTI, the Clinical Trial Transformation Initiative, published a paper in 2018 assessing the financial value of patient engagement. They took data from real clinical trials and monetized the cost savings of avoiding protocol amendments with patient engagement activities. I'll let you read the specifics, but suffice to say that a modest investment of $100,000 in patient engagement activities could potentially save a company millions of dollars, and just as importantly, years of time in advancing medicines to market. The reality is we all are or will be patients someday. We're all these biological vessels at the mercy of chronic and acute diseases. The power that we have in industry is our expertise and our collective passion to make a difference. Our commitment to patients and caregivers speaks to this aspiration of integrating patient perspectives more meaningfully and deeply into our daily work. And I'm speaking for all of us in the industry right now. Driving a better understanding of the science behind the diseases we research, developing medicines that truly address patient unmet needs from route of administration to mechanism of action, designing trials with the reality of a patient's life and family in mind, and working with payers and policymakers to ensure access to healthcare and the medicines that we work so hard to develop for patients. All of these should be a focus for us as we journey through drug development. But we can't reach these goals without working together with organizations that share the same vision. We recognize that long-term success depends on many things, but one important factor is building and sustaining trust with society, including patient groups and professional societies. At Novartis, we've taken a concerted effort to move away from transactional relationships with groups and work more collaboratively in a model of co-creation across disease awareness, education, clinical development, and policy. And although we work in a highly regulated industry and some decisions are not ours to make, some insights and perspectives we may not be able to incorporate into our work or solve for right away, that should never stop us from listening to patients with respect. I was and always will be a scientist, but science only serves as our north, our direction. Our patients serve as our true north, that destination for all of us. And that we have to remember at every junction in the work that we do making medicines. I want to sincerely thank you for your time. And should there be any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. We're all in this together.
Thank you, Dr. Tarver and Ms. Sellati, for sharing your insights and expertise with us. I would now like to pose a few questions to the both of you. First, with Dr. Tarver. Through your role at the FDA, you have had a tremendous amount of personal interaction with patients from many disease groups, including, of course, kidney patients. As a medical doctor, researcher, and U.S. government official, can you tell us how the stories and insights of patients you have met have impacted you professionally and as a person every day?
Well, I've been a caregiver, a patient, and a provider. And I can tell you that I've seen people go through difficult times and challenging healthcare situations. And that process teaches you a number of lessons. The first is to empathize, seek to understand, as well as look for solutions. And if we can develop solutions together that work for your life, for your values, then we've accomplished something. But I've also learned that we aren't always successful, but it doesn't mean we don't keep trying. And so with that, as a regulator, I am looking for ways in which we can expand the footprint of patients in the process, how we can incorporate their voice, but incorporate it in a meaningful way. It's not always successful. Even the research projects that we do are not always successful in accomplishing the goal that we'd like to accomplish. But it gives us insights and it gives us a step forward in the right direction of making this more of how we all do business in healthcare.
Thank you, Dr. Tarver. And now, Ms. Sellati, in your industry, where do you see the greatest opportunity and value for patient engagement?
Great question. You know, patient engagement is no longer a nice to have. It's now an essential part of a sustainable pharma business. But to me, the biggest opportunity is R&D. We need to begin early in basic research and really understand the humanistic patient journey, the disease burden, the unmet needs. We need to maintain this connectivity through clinical development, designing trials with people in mind, providing support throughout the duration of the trial to ensure that not only a high retention rate is maintained, but also that patients have a positive experience. And finally, identifying endpoints and PROs that are meaningful to patients. Across many therapeutic areas, there's a need and an opportunity here, and this is directly linked to meeting patients' unmet needs. If we're not solving their unmet needs, we're not solving their problems. So really listening to patients and their true needs saves time and money in research costs and clinical trial execution. And also regulators and HTA bodies endorse the value of patient engagement through initiatives like PFDD, the Patient-Focused Drug Development, Paradigm, FBIA, and CADTH. So patient engagement is no longer a nice to have. It's really now an essential part of a sustainable business in advancing medicines.
Thank you, Ms. Sellati. And now a final question for you, Dr. Tarver. The Global Summit audience has expanded rapidly over the past several years and now includes researchers, regulators, and patients worldwide. As a U.S. regulatory official who is actively encouraging companies to include patient insights across the product development lifecycle, what message do you have for researchers, regulators, and patients considering the inclusion of patient insight data in their countries?
Well, I think the first thing, as I alluded to in my presentation, is the importance of thinking about the patient's input across the total product lifecycle. There is not one point only in which the patient's voice should be included. Because medical devices are being developed for people in various countries, what those unmet needs are in terms of how the disease may manifest in their lives may vary. And so asking the patients that will actually be using that device may be important. I think it's also important to think about how do you communicate to patients and measure the outcomes that are important to patients, the language that's used, the cultural references that are important, as well as the features of their life vary from country to country. So one person's measurement in one country may not reflect the experience of patients in other countries. So including the voices of the patients that are using that device in their respective locations is critical, as well as the post-market experience. Care is different from country to country. And so including patients in various countries in the process of understanding the post-market surveillance once the device is in general use is going to be critical too. So as I said, across the total product life cycle, patients from all backgrounds in various countries should be considered.
Thank you, Dr. Tarver. And final question for you, Ms. Sellati. What are some patient engagement best practices you would recommend to your peers in the industry?
Great question. A lot of PE practices that I would recommend to my fellow colleagues. I think there's 6 that I want to highlight here. The first is really starting early, engaging with patients early and engaging in a manner that's inappropriate with where you are in development. Many development programs don't move forward. So really taking the time to work with patients early to understand disease burden, unmet needs, and expectations with new medications and support programs. The second is listening with respect. I mentioned that we work in a highly regulated industry and some decisions are not ours to make, but that shouldn't stop us from listening to patients with respect. The third is moving away from these transactional relationships with patient advocacy groups and moving towards more strategic partnerships. Working with organizations very early on to set strategy, drive strategy, and develop the tactical plans to fit that strategy. I've been working with consultants a lot more earlier to really help me shape strategies for certain programs. The fourth is do not reinvent the wheel or solve for problems that do not exist. It's more often than not, we have really great ideas that we think are serving a need or solving a problem. But when we look out there, we realize that there's a lot of solutions that already exist. So it's a matter of really understanding what's out there and harnessing that, and then working in a co-creation manner with our community to build out solutions that are meaningful. Next is leveraging a multi-stakeholder approach to identifying gaps and solving for problems. I think more so now we're seeing that a lot of solutions are really being pulled through by multiple stakeholders. So really upfront in identifying where there's gaps and opportunities, leveraging that multi-stakeholder approach. And finally, really demonstrating our commitment to the community with the pull-through and really making sure that we're not doing these one-off types of transactions, but really some sort of continuity with respect to our projects and our relationships. And this will really help to maintain and grow mutually beneficial relationships and maintain transparency with our organizations in this space.
Thank you again, Dr. Tarver and Ms. Sellati. At this time, I'd now like to introduce my colleague, Ms. Erin Kale, Director of Stakeholder Operations for the AAKP Center for Patient Engagement and Advocacy. Ms. Kale will be speaking with AAKP's Global Ambassador from Ireland, Mr. Colm Clifford. As a fellow kidney patient and current transplant recipient, Mr. Clifford is a leader in organizing patient consumers in Ireland and the EU. We are pleased to have him join us, and I would now like to go to the interview.
Colm, thank you for joining us today. When you think about everything you have been through as a patient, what does it mean to you that you can be involved in helping kidney researchers and innovators around the world to better understand the impact of the disease on people and help to develop new therapies to help reduce or end suffering for others?
I've seen, both as a child and as an adult, what kidney disease does to a person. I was 12 years of age when I went on dialysis, and I was in dialysis. There were 4 exchanges a day for, as I said, approximately 2 years before I got my first transplant. Unfortunately, that transplant never functioned, and the kidney had to be replaced within 48 hours, taken out. I went back on dialysis again for another 8 months before I got my successful kidney transplant. And I was very fortunate that lasted for 22 years. After that 22 years, unfortunately, again, I ended up going back on dialysis. First of all, I went on the 4 exchanges day again, and then I moved on to hemodialysis. So I believe with my experience, I would have a lot to offer. I believe that kidney disease it's like a glass of water if you think about it. You actually have, if the glass is half full, people are going to look, is it half full or half empty? Where your innovators will often think, okay, maybe why can't we just refill the glass of water up to the top? And I think that's why it's so important, having been through it yourself, that you can actually give that advice to people that are hoping to make a difference. Statistics and everything are great, but nothing beats talking to a person who's actually been through it themselves. And nothing beats life experience. When you have that, I often kind of believe there's no such thing as a bad day. You have good days, and good days brings you joy and happiness, but bad days actually brings you life experience. So when you come across a bad day again, you'll know how to deal with it.
What does innovation mean to you, and how do you think kidney patients like yourself should be involved in innovation when it comes to new medicines, therapies, and treatments for people with kidney disease?
As I say, I can only draw on my own experience. I remember when I was diagnosed first back in 1988 and I went on dialysis, I was getting blood transfusion approximately every 3 weeks. And as we all know now, getting a blood transfusion when you're hoping to get a kidney or any organ increases antibodies, which is a big no-no. Just from my first time to the next time, to think that that was all done away with and I was using EPO to bring up your red blood cells, that to me was just a small change that made a huge difference to my life. Instead of having to go into a hospital for every 3 weeks for a blood transfusion, it was something that was either injected myself or it was given in through the dialysis machine. Like dialysis itself, look, it's not easy. It can be an awful burden, but you got to make it work for yourself. But dialysis hasn't really changed an awful lot since its inception, really. Like, there's different variations where you can do your 4 exchanges a day, you can do your nighttime dialysis, you can do home hemo, or you can do hemo in the hospital. But I'd like to think that we could do a lot more for people, and the main thing is to try and keep people out of hospital. So I think with the way science is going and everything, I think AI is the big thing, and I would be looking at something along the lines of something that we could maybe implant into people to kind of do the work of the kidney. It's not going to replace the kidney, but it may replace the likes of dialysis. That's what I would like to see. You will still long term, you will still obviously need a kidney, but just for dialysis alone, no. I believe that's the way forward, because where kidney diseases can be very debilitating, you still got to live your life, and not everyone is fortunate enough to be in a position where they get paid to be off work while they're ill. People have to work, so by giving them their freedom, for a better word, that would be the biggest change I could see, that I would like to see happen when it comes to kidney care at the moment, in the short to medium term. A kidney is obviously going to be much harder because when you're dealing with a kidney, you're dealing with a filter, for basically, as opposed to the likes of a heart. And I'm not demeaning one organ against the other, but at the end of the day, a heart, what you're dealing with is actually a pump, which is something that can be replicated, whereas a kidney, it's not as simple when you're dealing with a filter. So I believe that's what I would like to see happening on myself, is something that could be implanted, maybe with the use of artificial intelligence, to be able to guide that kidney to do what it's required to do.
Colm, you are a very informed patient, and you also work in the pharmaceutical space. As far as being a patient and a consumer of healthcare, how do you think advocacy organizations like AAKP, the Kidney Association in Ireland that you are involved with, government agencies, and industry can work together and bring patients to the table?
I think from a pharmaceutical point of view, I think even someone going in that actually has had a transplant, and just speak to the people inside, or even if it's just to speak to everyone that's on the floor in a general forum, like a lot of people who go to work and they just see it as a job. But when you're on the receiving end and you're actually taking the medication that's actually made, you require I suppose you see the importance of it, really, like, and I think that's important too for the people that are working there, to show that these, whether it be capsules or tablets, they're actually made. They're just not. They're not a statistic that pack is gone out the door to someone. You see face, and I know with the new systems with medication, you can track and trace. The company can track and trace to see what chemist and all that it goes to. So I think by seeing a face who has been through the whole series from start to finish, like if you are lucky enough to get a transplant and be taking that medication, I think that opens people's lives, or their eyes, sorry, to realize that there's a lot more going on than just doing your day's work. Like, people mightn't appreciate it, but it is actually, their day's work is actually life-saving. Like, receiving a kidney is the greatest gift anyone could ever give you. But at the end of the day, that gift will only work if your medication is working, and obviously you're taking your medication. So by showing someone, and even if it is a case of you're talking to someone prior to getting a transplant to see how ill you are, and maybe 6 months afterwards to see the difference in a person, I think sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words. And by seeing someone like that, I think that would be huge from a pharmaceutical point of view. I love the phrase, education is key and knowledge is power. I often say that to people in our own support group. By educating people, you're giving them back the power to take control of their own life or of their own medicine, really, like, because a lot of the time here, they're like rabbits in the headlights. That's why I love meeting people that are newly diagnosed, and you take the fear factor away. And that's why advocacy groups and the AAKP Kidney Foundation, that's why it's so important that there's ready-made information available for anyone who wants it. And it just really does, it just takes the fear out of it, like, because kidney disease, to me, like, it's 80% mental and 20% physical. If you're in a good headspace, you're going to get through it. If you are struggling, it is a slog, and there's no easy way about it. Like, you are going to struggle big time.
How important is it for patients to raise their voices and create the demand for new diagnostics, devices, and biologics?
It's a tough one, because we probably don't really get the opportunity here in Ireland, because we're probably so far behind United States. But I suppose in a slight way, I'm kind of jealous, because I see all the work that's actually been done over there, and the AKP is at the forefront of everything, which is fantastic, because you're aware of each and every development that's happening. And yes, I know you don't want this to be premature with good news in case something goes wrong. But it's great that you are at the forefront of things, like whether it be legislation, or whether it be companies trying to provide new ways or areas of exploring how to do things differently. I think that's where people should be at, and it gives people a sense of purpose as well after your transplant. A lot of people like to give something back, and help people, but there's no better way than helping the people that have yet to be diagnosed by, for a better word, you being a guinea pig, maybe. Whether it be taking part in studies, clinical studies, or just filling out questionnaires, it all helps, and that's why the AAKP, sorry, excuse me, is so important. It doesn't matter whether you're in the United States or what part of the world is, because information is key, and it's always there, and it's there on a regular basis, constantly updated, and you can't put a price on that.
How do you feel an international consortium led by patients would help kidney patients in your country?
As I say, we are quite a bit behind the United States. We're for the last 2 years trying to push through legislation to have altruistic donors, because we're not actually allowed to have those in Ireland, and we don't have. They were trying to bring in an opt-out system here as well in Ireland, but there's an argument, and I kind of agree with this. If you're going to have an opt-out system, maybe you're better off having a register of who wants to be a donor. So, as I say, we are so far behind with where we are. It's probably a very hard question to answer from my point of view in Ireland. Well, all I can say is probably maybe repeating what I said already, is that it's vitally important to be at the forefront of things. Companies need people who've been there, been through it. I previously said statistics are fantastic, but you need people who have experience, who can give the proper advice to say yes or no to this. This will work, this won't work, and then you get a wide variety of opinions. Now, the great thing about having people from internationally is that chances are in every country, no one's at the exact same, like what would say, pace is probably the wrong word to use. As in, we'd be so far behind the United States, but the UK would be ahead of us. So everyone's at a different, what would I say, junction, I suppose is the word you'd use. So everyone's learning off everyone else. No one said there's a right or wrong way, but the day you stop learning is the day you close your eyes, to be honest. So there's always room for improvement.
Do you feel it will bring kidney disease on a larger radar and push for things to happen more quickly?
Yes, I believe so. There's nothing like a global voice. It's like one country could be beating a drum, and if it's not, if no one's believing what they're saying, it kind of gets lost. Whereas if you have a collective group internationally, people sit up and take notice, and they're going to listen to see, okay, what is this group on about? What can we do to help them? And I think at times the big problem, and I've even noticed myself with kidney disease, people think, okay, Colm, you've been lucky enough. Yeah, you've had the transplant, and you're fixed. That's the end of it. Well, like a transplant is still another form of treatment, no matter what way you look at it, because you're taking meds. So you're constantly learning. You're trying to maintain your kidney. You're watching your diet. All those things are a constant, and that's a constant for people all over the world who've had the transplant. So already there's so much to have in common. So then the more you have in the group, the more collective ideas you have, and sometimes there might be something that you never thought about, and someone from another country would, and it rings a bell, and sometimes maybe it sets a chain of events that could come to something amazing. and you'll never know unless you have the conversation.
I like how you talked about being a guinea pig for those who are newly diagnosed. Can you share how it has helped you as a patient to know that others have been through similar experiences?
I'll tell you, I might actually go the opposite way if it's okay with you, Aaron. I might actually speak from my experiences from helping others, if that's okay. Just a simple thing, like in our own local support group, we had a lady came in, and she was an elderly lady, and she was absolutely petrified because she heard she had to go on dialysis. Now, I'm a big believer. I'm a guy in my 40s. There's no point in me to speaking to someone in their 70s because they're going to think, what will he know? He's a young guy, plenty of energy. He's fine. There's no point in talking to him. So you got to kind of, for me, match like for like. So I was able to call on a lady that had the transplant, and she was similar in age. And that evening, we sat down inside the house. We had a chat, and I introduced her to this other lady, and she was able to sit down, talk her through all her fears. The lady that was going on dialysis was petrified about a fistula. So she was able to see what exactly a fistula was, and she was kind of thinking to herself, what was I panicking about? And we have our meetings once a month, and then the following month, she was on to her husband, could she go again? The following month, she came again, and she asked more questions, which goes back to my education is key and knowledge is power. And within a few weeks, she had a fistula, and she rang afterwards to thank us for what we did. No, I don't need thanks. I probably get more out of it than those people do, being able to help people. But that's just a very simple way of how you can help someone. A lot of it's just fear of the unknown. And if you can take that fear out and people know what's ahead of them, it makes life a lot easier for them. Like, and that, as I say, that's just a very simple instance, and we've had many of those.
Colm, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your perspective as a kidney patient and for all the great work you do for kidney patients in Ireland. We also thank you for being an AAKP Global Ambassador. Thank you to everyone who joined us for this session.